Cold doesn't negotiate. It creeps. It steals feeling first, then strength, then judgment. In World War II, frozen toes weren't just uncomfortable, they were career-ending, sometimes even life-ending. Soldiers didn't have heated insoles, battery packs, or, those breathable, space-age fabrics we take for granted today. What they had instead was a brutally simple hack that saved toes, prevented amputations, and honestly still outperforms a shocking amount of modern winter gear. And, well, almost nobody talks about it anymore. This is one of those ideas that sounds too basic to work. That's why it works. Why toes freeze before anything else? Your toes are expendable from your body's point of view. When temperatures drop, blood is pulled inward to protect vital organs. Feet, fingers, ears, they're last in line. Add tight boots, sweat, and hours of immobility, and you've built the perfect recipe for frostbite. During World War II, cold injuries sidelined hundreds of thousands of soldiers. In some campaigns, more troops were lost to cold than to enemy fire. That forced armies to get very serious about foot survival, very fast. Here's the part most people miss. Cold alone doesn't freeze toes. Moisture and restricted circulation do the real damage. The hack modern gear still ignores. The toe-saving trick was shockingly simple. Soldiers were taught to wear boots that felt slightly too big and to deliberately reduce insulation inside them. That sounds backwards, but it solved the real problem. Space equals warmth when blood can move freely. Cramped toes go numb. Free toes stay alive. But the real secret weapon wasn't the boot size. It was the sock system. Instead of thick padded socks that trap sweat, many World War II units shifted toward thin inner layers and frequent sock changes. Dry feet were warm feet. Wet feet died fast. Some soldiers even removed socks entirely during marches, letting boots dry against body heat, then putting socks back on only during rest. Counterintuitive, uncomfortable, but, brutally effective. Why thick socks can betray you. Modern winter culture sells bulk as protection. Thicker socks, more padding. Tighter boots for support. World War II proved that logic wrong the hard way. Thick socks compress blood vessels when boots are laced. That reduces circulation. Reduced circulation means less heat delivery. And, less heat means frostbite sneaks in silently. Soldiers who loosened their boots just a bit and wore thinner socks often stayed warmer than those bundled up like walking mattresses. It wasn't about insulation at all. It was about circulation management. Keep blood moving and toes stay alive. This is why, actually, some World War II manuals warned against overdressing feet. They recognized that warmth comes from within, not from stuffing fabric into a confined space. Now, the paper barrier trick, here's where it gets wild. When temperatures dropped into those brutal ranges, soldiers sometimes wrapped toes in paper before putting on socks. Newspaper, maps, really, any dry paper they could find. Not for insulation, but for moisture control. Paper absorbed sweat before it soaked the sock. Dry socks retained heat longer. Wet socks became ice. Paper also created micro-air pockets, tiny spaces that slowed heat loss without compressing circulation. It was disposable, lightweight, and, well, everywhere. Primitive, yes. Effective, absolutely. This wasn't folklore. It was field-tested survival. Why this still beats modern winter gear? Modern boots often focus on sealing everything in. Waterproof membranes, foam padding, synthetic insulation, great on paper, dangerous in prolonged cold if moisture can't escape. Once sweat builds up, your foot becomes its own freezer. The World War II approach prioritized adjustability. Boots you could loosen, socks you could change, systems you could adapt hour by hour. That flexibility kept feet alive across frozen forests, mountain passes and open plains. Even today, experienced cold-weather workers quietly follow the same principles. Slightly oversized boots, thin socks, frequent drying, air over bulk, movement over compression. What frostbite doesn't want you to know. Frostbite isn't always dramatic. It doesn't always announce itself with pain. Quite often it starts with numbness and a pale, waxy look. By the time pain hits, damage is already underway. World War II soldiers were trained to recognize early signs and act immediately. Loosen boots, wiggle toes, restore circulation before insulation. That mindset matters. Gear doesn't save you. Awareness does. Why did this knowledge vanish, you might wonder? Well, after the war, consumer culture really took over. Bigger, thicker, heavier, those things just sold better. Battery-powered heat promised effortless warmth, and, simplicity doesn't really market well. A lesson that says, loosen your boots and wear thinner socks, just doesn't look all that impressive on a shop shelf. So the old knowledge faded away, not because it failed, mind you, but simply because it didn't look modern enough. Here's how you can use this today without, reenacting history. You don't need paper maps or surplus boots to apply this. Just choose winter footwear with a bit of room to spare. Prioritize circulation over snugness. Use thin, moisture-wicking layers instead of bulky insulation. Dry your feet whenever you get the chance. And if your toes feel cold, loosen before you add. That's the core lesson World War II burned into history with frozen blood and lost limbs. Cold is beaten by strategy, not stuffing. Why this matters beyond history? This isn't nostalgia, it's practicality. Whether you're hiking, working outdoors, dealing with power outages, or just trying to survive winter smarter, this hack still works. It worked when failure meant amputation. It works now when comfort is on the line. Before modern times, people didn't guess. They learned fast, or they didn't come home. And now you know one of their best-kept secrets. If this changed the way you think about cold, hit subscribe. Share this with someone who thinks thicker always means warmer. And stick around. Because before modern times, survival wasn't optional, and the lessons still matter today.